Hello, my name's Danielle Thom and I'm the Curator of Making here at the Museum of London. Today I want to talk to you about this fantastic ceramic figure. She's called Venus by the ceramicist Claire Partington. Now, Venus is an allegorical figure, which is to say that a lot of her surface decoration, a lot of the attributes and objects that she's holding or standing next to have some kind of metaphorical or mythological connection. The artist, Claire, is a ceramicist whose work specializes in this kind of figure, female figures mostly, which connect with all kinds of historical, mythological, religious, and other cultural references. What I want to do for you today is take a bit of a deep dive into the different decorations, the different objects, the different references that you can see in this figure and pick a little bit out about what they might mean. It's important to say that there's no one definitive right way to look at this object and enjoy it. Let's take a look at the figure herself. So she's a standing female figure, and as you can see, she's got 1, 2, 3, 4 arms, which is a reference to Hindu mythology. And in particular, we can read this as a callback to the deity Mahadevi, the mother goddess, who is a kind of divine energy from which all things emanate. Appropriately enough, this Venus is pregnant, and one of her hands rests on her pregnant belly, very visibly pregnant. Of course, in one of her other hands, there's a cigarette perched casually aloft. We're not quite sure what to make of that. She's got slicked back golden hair pulled in a bun at the base of her neck, which calls back to medieval and Renaissance paintings of Madonnas, the mother of Christ. So there's a bit of a conflict at play here between the idea of the pregnant, virtuous, divine mother and also the kind of earthy, normal, everyday woman who actually exists in real life. If we look at her clothes, we can dive into that a bit more. She's casually dressed. She's wearing a vest top with a bit of visible bra poking out at the top, and leggings, which are dark blue with a hand-painted pattern of black chain links on them, and gold-tinted Reebok Classics just at the bottom there. So she's dressed like any casual young woman walking around the streets of London might be. There's nothing abnormal in it. And in that sense, she is an everyday woman, even though she has these kind of divine and mythological attributes. So we can see her as kind of a character in her own right, but also as a metaphor for different aspects of womanhood. Her pregnant belly we can take literally as, she's expecting a child, but pregnancy is also used in classical mythology and in Western art as kind of a metaphor for creation, for life, but also as a reminder of death, the inevitable cycle of life and death. And in fact, on her stomach, on her vest top, is a cosmological wheel or calendar indicating the passage of time. And you can also see, if you look very closely, printed onto her wrist is a watch, again, a reminder of time. Venus is clutching in one of her hands a golden dog lead, and attached to the lead, with this very fetching De Monte collar, is a two-headed Staffordshire Terrier. Now, the two-headed dog also has a basis in mythology. Cerberus, the dog that guarded the underworld, Hades in Greek mythology, although we think of Cerberus as being a three-headed dog, actually a lot of early depictions of Cerberus showed him as having 2 heads, or even in some cases 50 heads. Cerberus guarded the underworld and prevented the souls of the dead from escaping back to the land of the living. So again, we have a reminder of death, even as this figure speaks to the idea of birth and of life. There's this constant cycle, this back and forth between beginning and ending. Finally, a word about some of her jewellery and some of the objects that are represented on the ground next to her. So down here we have a hand mirror, a comb, but also a plastic water bottle, a handbag, some jewellery. And these again, thinking about the history of Western art and classical mythology, these are objects that have been used to signify vanity, beauty, love, and so on. She's heavily adorned with gold jewellery, and from a technical point of view, Claire, the artist, has actually made sure that she has real pierced ears. So these earrings are not ceramic, they're actual jewellery. Also, just a callback to her title. She's called Venus, and Venus was the Roman goddess of love, sex, and fertility. And obviously, all of those attributes are spoken to here. With her pregnancy, with these, the comb and the mirror at the bottom of her feet here. But as I said, she's also bringing in elements of other mythological traditions, including Greek and Hindu. And if we just take a look at her face quickly, you can see that her expression is quite contemplative, quite neutral. She's looking outwards, but she's not directly gazing at the viewer. And her cheeks are stained a very, very, deep, flushed pink, which is interesting, partly because it's one of the things that connects this figure to earlier 18th century porcelain female figures. We actually have a couple of examples in the case next to her for comparison and contrast. But also, in an 18th century context, blushing was associated again with love, desire, sex, and fertility. It was seen as a sign of arousal. So the fact that she's shown as very heavily blushing is, I think, interesting and significant. You can see Claire Partington's Venus, along with other wonderful objects by contemporary London makers, in the free display London Making Now, which is here at London Wall until the 24th of April.